You're listening to the Dibbly-Dobbly podcast. Remember to like, share, comment, subscribe, and click the bell to make sure you get the latest episodes of the podcast. Be sure to like and share our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter and on Instagram. So Trevor, moving on, let's talk about the Bradman Collection. Let's talk about the collection in the museum at Adelaide Oval. The Bradman Collection has some priceless and personal artifacts which belonged to Sir Donald Bradman. Also, the collection has other cricketing artifacts from the game's history here in South Australia, but also in Australian cricket as well. And the collection and museum is a must for everyone to go and see when visiting the Adelaide Oval. So, Trevor, explain to us, how is the collection and museum is preserving the history of Sir Donald Bradman and the game of cricket's history? And what artifacts does the collection and museum have in its collection?
Okay, well, it's easy for the collection to preserve the history of Sir Donald Bradman because what's in the collection are the things that he had in his home. So it's his personal collection, things that he thought were worthy of keeping. It came about back in the 1960s. Both he and his wife were big collectors of newspaper articles. They kept all the letters, cards, postcards, and that they got. And they had that many that they were approached by the State Library, and the State Library offered to collate all of those things. And when they did, they ended up with 52 scrapbooks full. And they're now in the National Library in Canberra. But the Bradmans were so impressed with what they did that later in life, when they decided they needed to do something with the things they had at home, they thought of the State Library, and it was actually donated to the State Library of South Australia, who now own the collection. And it was Don's wish that some of it be displayed at Adelaide Oval, which it is now in a dedicated museum. So it really reflects not only his cricketing abilities and cricketing records, but almost his life as well. There's things like the typewriter he used when he was writing either books or information for newspapers and things like that. So it's quite a personal collection for Don Bradman.
Yes, absolutely. Is there one item that people just can't believe they've seen of Bradman in the museum? Do you ever get that when people just ask you, wow, this is a striking item?
I guess the one that we like to point out to people is a vase that he was presented by the Worcester Porcelain Company, because in Bradman's day, when they went to England, the first game was always at Worcester in front of the Worcester Cathedral at the ground there, a very pretty ground. Bradman went to England 4 times. The first 3 times he went, he made a double century each time at Worcester. And so the Worcester Porcelain Company made this blue vase that was Don and Jessie's favourite piece of memorabilia. It sat on their mantelpiece at their Kensington Gardens home. And we always like pointing that out because we also have a copy on the vase itself. There's an image of Bradman playing at the Worcester ground in front of the cathedral, and it's based on a photograph that was taken, and we actually have the photograph there as well, so we can point to both of them. Unfortunately, the 4th time that he went to England and he played at Worcester was after the war, and so there'd been a gap of 8 or 9 years, and he only made 107. So lucky he got the vase before he failed.
Yeah, absolutely. But he always used to have those things made for him. I remember watching a bit of a news archive film of him on the ABC being presented with a porcelain figure of him. And It was a limited collection, I believe, of figures that were being sold to the public of him playing, one of his cover drives or whatever.
Yes.
He is arguably the greatest batter that ever played, and anything Bradman related is very collectible, isn't it?
Yes, there's all sorts of things in there. There's the ball that was used in his very first game for New South Wales when they played in Broken Hill as they were coming to South Australia to play the Shield game, and he batted in that game on a concrete pitch covered in matting, and he had to wear his street shoes because his cricket boots wouldn't work on a matting covered concrete pitch. I think he made 42 in that game, second top score or something. Came on to Adelaide, played his debut Sheffield Shield game for New South Wales and made 117.
Well, that was just the genius of the man. And then the following year, he was selected to play for Australia in the first test of that Ashes series in 1928-29. Do you have, his baggy greens? Do you have his caps that he wore for Australia or South Australia, New South Wales at all in the collection, or that's just other museums around Australia?
Well, by the end of his career, he didn't own any of his own baggy greens. He didn't have one at home because in his day they were treated a bit like a pair of batting gloves or anything else. They were handed out as souvenirs. But we do have a 1948 Invincibles baggy green of Bradman's in the collection, which came about as a bit of a surprise. It's been donated to the collection when one was sold at auction in the early 2000s for about $400,000. This other one came to light, and it turned out that on that tour they were all given 2 caps, and it was written into their contract. And this particular cap Bradman gave to the man who was doing his banking in England at the time, and it ended up with that person's son who had it at his school. And when the school heard of the first 1948 cap selling for such a huge amount, they put it in the safe because they weren't going to have it hanging in the pavilion any longer. And the owner wanted it where it could be seen and displayed, so he offered it to the Bradman Collection. So it's the one item that we have that Bradman didn't have it in his house. Yes,
well, it's such a rare piece, actually, because that's the 1948 Invincibles, which Bradman was captain, and he never lost a single. Well, they never lost a single game on that tour.
No,
that's why they're the greatest Australian team to play in England, which is a remarkable achievement. And that's where Bradman retired. That's his last tour.
Yes,
and we'll talk about that a little bit later on when we talk about the man himself and his great achievements in the game. Any other items that you have in the collection that are quite historic in terms of South Australian cricket? I know you mentioned the Sheffield Shield, of course, because South Australia's the custodians of that. Any other historical items besides from Bradman that the museum has, either Australian cricket or South Australian cricket?
Within the Oval itself, we've got items displayed in quite a few places. I guess the other significant items that we had, you mentioned Joe Darling hitting the 6 in Adelaide. We've got the bat that he hit it with in the committee room on display. And we also have on loan Don Bradman's first test bat, the bat he used in Brisbane, that he eventually donated to the Sydney Children's Hospital to be used as a fundraiser. And that's been sold several times. And at the moment, it's on loan to the Cricket Association in South Australia, and that's on display in our committee room. So that's a fairly significant piece of Bradman history.
Absolutely. Do you have any other sporting items on display, or is it just purely Bradman and cricket in the collection or museum?
Within the Bradman collection itself, it's entirely Bradman, but around the ground there are other items. We've got several areas where there's baggy green caps from various South Australians. Some of Ian Chappell's are on display there, and there's one area in the Oval called the Bodyline Bar, which is all about the Bodyline series, and particularly the Bodyline Test in Adelaide, and that has memorabilia from that era as well.
Yeah, but it must be the one place that people want to go and have a tour in the museum and have a look at those cricketing artifacts.
Yes, it's as I said, it was Bradman's wish that the Bradman collection be open and accessible to the public, and Adelaide Oval is in a unique position because as part of the parklands, we have to be open and accessible to the public. Now, things have changed these days with security and that, but on non-event days, the southern gate at Adelaide Oval's always open. People can wander in, have a look at the ground from behind the seats, and go into the Bradman Collection and the visitor centre and see what's in there as well, which is rather unusual for a major sporting facility anywhere in the world to be sort of open business hours for anyone to wander in.
Yes, it is. Quite unusual for that to happen. When was the collection and the museum established, and what year was that?
Okay, the museum or the Bradman Collection that the State Library got was officially unveiled in 1998 with a display in the State Library. And in fact, to publicise it, the main shopping mall in Adelaide, the Rundle Mall, had its name changed for about a week to the Bradman Mall. And they changed all the street signs there. And so it was known as Bradman Mall for a week as part of the publicising of the Bradman Collection being open for viewing. And that was at the State Library. And now part of that collection's on show at the Adelaide Oval.
Yep. So Trevor, just explain to us your role at Adelaide Oval as a tour guide, etc. So just explain, what do you do at Adelaide Oval?
Okay, well, I'm one of a team of volunteers who take guided tours of the Oval. We run tours 7 days a week, morning and afternoon, public tours. We also do tours for school groups, corporate groups, and special tours for particular themes at the Oval. So we're always busy doing those sorts of things, and it's quite an interesting role because we get not only the cricket mad people or cricket enthusiasts, but quite a few people who just like the look of Adelaide Oval and want to have a look and find out about it. So sometimes we're talking details about cricket, and other times it's architecture or grass, all sorts of things that interest people. And we've had people from all sorts of countries that you wouldn't associate with, particularly with cricket, who've come to the Adelaide Oval, and it's very difficult explaining cricket to someone who has never heard of the game, or even Australian rules football, because we talk a bit about that too, because that's part of Adelaide Oval as well.
Yeah, it must be the best job in the world, isn't it? Working at Adelaide Oval.
It's totally different taking a group of people around Adelaide Oval on a nice warm day than it is to being there when there's 40 or 50,000 people there all cheering on a game. When there's nothing going on the grass, it's a really pleasant environment to wander around and have a good chat with people.
Yeah, absolutely. If people want to go to Adelaide Oval for a tour, Trevor, where can they go and do that? Who can they contact and access to organise that?
They can tours can be booked, and they can be booked through the Adelaide Oval website. Just go to the tours link, and they can book tours. Or they can ring the Adelaide Oval concierge on 8211 1100 and book a tour, or they can drop in and we'll take walk-up people for tours, providing they are booked out. So it's always preferable to book if they can, but if not, someone comes in for a tour, we'll try and squeeze them in anyway.
Absolutely, it's a must when you come into Adelaide, either from overseas or interstate. It's a must to go to see Adelaide Oval and hopefully watch a sporting event there, either cricket or football or any other sport that the Oval has on at that time, or even concerts.
Yeah. The tours go right around the ground and usually take about 90 minutes to explore Adelaide Oval.
Absolutely. Hi everyone, hope you enjoyed our historical series episode, looking back at the history of Adelaide Oval with Trevor Manuel, ambassador and tour guide at Adelaide Oval. If you are interested in visiting Adelaide Oval or visiting the Bradman Collection, head over to the Adelaide Oval website, which is in the description of this episode.